going to get started. All right. So just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Trish Gallen, and I own a facility called Method 360, and it's right down on Bridge Street, just down the road. Hi, how are you? Welcome. Come on in. So I'm the fitness director there. And so we have a facility, it's about 9,000 square feet, where we offer educative fitness. It's very open level, one size fits all, and we like to educate people on how to work out properly. So as we go through, just to be completely open, I'm a geek. I'm a huge geek, and please don't feel like you're going to interrupt me. Interrupt me at any time if you have any questions. You want to dive deeper into anything, because I have so much information in my brain that I could talk about this all day. This is my absolute passion, and I've loved this ever since I can remember, since I was 5 years old. So please feel free to stop me at any time. So we're going to be talking about myths in fitness, and there's a lot. There's a lot of misinformation when it comes to fitness. And what we're trying to do at Method is basically deprogram the thinking that we've been trained to believe to be true and reprogram really good information that's very practically applicable, if that makes any sense. So just to speak to what I do a little bit, I am a personal trainer, so I am a fitness expert. I went to an academy in Boston, and it's the only hands-on personal training academy in the entire country. So there's only 2 schools you have to be accepted in. It's an intensive program, so every day, at the time I lived on Nantucket Island, I would get in my car, I would drive from Nantucket to Boston. So you have to, if you don't know Nantucket, it's an island, and so you have to take a plane or a boat. So I would take the plane or the boat over to the Cape. I would drive from the Cape to Boston every single day, and I would sit in the back bay and learn all about fitness, and I'd get right back in my car and drive home. And I'm also a single mother of 2, so it was just such a great opportunity that I wanted to go to the best school in the country, so luckily I was able to do that. It's very hands-on, so they teach us what we need to know there in the facility, and also after learning about the information, we would go into the studio and we would practically apply the information. So if somebody said, let's talk about squats, we would go in, we'd talk about the biomechanics of the squat, we'd go into the facility, and we'd learn how they looked and how to fix people. And they bring in all kinds of different bodies and teach us how to train to different personalities, different bodies, and different fitness levels. I didn't think that being a personal trainer was enough, so I have a huge passion for yoga. So after going to school in Boston, I decided to go to yoga teacher training. So again, I wanted to go to the best school, so I found White Lotus Foundation in Santa Barbara, California. Again, have to be accepted in, so I had a legacy that was helpful in helping me be able to learn and go to school. I studied under Ganga White and Tracy Rich, which are 2 of the pioneers of the yoga practice, and I went for my 200-hour yoga teacher training in Santa Barbara. I'm also a wellness coach and a TRX specialist, so I try to make myself as well-rounded as possible, and I really just try to gather as much information, and the reason I want to have this information is so I can give it to you so that you can use it. So that's what I do. So basically, like I said, I'm just a geek, and I'm here to tell you what I know, so hopefully it can help you understand this a little bit better. So beginning with the biggest myth, probably the biggest myth in fitness, and this is huge with a huge circle around it, is that cardiovascular work is king. And I'm probably going to ask you guys a lot of questions just to kind of get you thinking. So cardiovascular work. I just want you to envision a gym, all right? When you walk into a gym, let's use Gold's or the Y as an example. And I will use these examples, and hopefully there's not a lot of emotional attachment to these gyms. They're just used for examples. What do you see typically when you walk into the gym? When you walk into a gym, when you just vision a gym, what do you envision? What do you see people doing? Machines, right? And do you see most people on machines that here or here, or do you see them running or on the treadmill or on the elliptical, right? That's what we normally see, yeah. On the Stairmaster, things like that, yeah. And that makes complete sense. So this is one thing that we're trying to reprogram people's thinking. Cardio is incredibly beneficial. However, in America, in the United States, we primarily focus on cardiovascular work, and I think we can probably all agree, and I was that way. When I was in school in Boston, we called these fatigue junkies, cardio junkies, if that makes any sense. And so we've been trained to believe that cardio is the absolute end all of fitness, and it's super important. And there's a lot more to the story. So cardio is king. This brings us to the first piece of information that changed my life as far as fitness was concerned. So when I first went to school, I was a triathlete. So I weighed 140 pounds. Again, I'm a mother of 2 small children, or I was at the time, and I was training for a triathlon. So triathlon, just in case you don't know, is a swim, which is anywhere from between half a mile to, depending on your Ironman's, a full mile or whatever, a cycle, and then a run. So out of these 3 things that triathletes do, does any of those involve strength training? Swimming, cardiovascular, right? Running, cardiovascular. Cycling, cardiovascular, right? So as a triathlete, when you know somebody that's a triathlete, you're like, wow, they're in good shape. The thing is, they're really only working cardiovascularly. So there is some strength training components. Like if you go running, you're going to feel sore, especially if you haven't done it before. If you get on a bike, you're going to feel sore. If you swim and you haven't swum before, you're going to feel sore. However, you're not really changing the structure of your body. Your energy is being expended, meaning your heart rate's going to go up and calories are going to be burnt. However, this is where we start to play into energy systems. So does anybody here, when we get physically fit, most people have a goal when they walk in the door. And the first goal is like, I want to lose weight. Fair? Does that make sense? Okay. What kind of weight do you want to lose? Fat, right? Okay. So if we're working out cardiovascularly, we have different energy systems that the body uses in order for us to do anything. And basically, the energy systems light up something called metabolism. I'm sure we've all heard that word. And really basically defined, metabolism is defined as the energy required to do work, right? So in order for me to do this movement, metabolism has to kick in. Something on the cellular level has to happen, scientifically in order for that to happen. So if we want to burn fat, right, does anybody have an idea of how long, if once you started to elevate your heart rate, how long it takes you to get to the fat-burning portion of your workout? So say you wanted to burn, somebody comes into my office and they say, okay, Trish, I want to lose 20 pounds. And I ask them the question, okay, what kind of pounds do you want to lose? I want to lose fat. Okay, cool. How long does it take you to burn fat? So when you start working out, your heart rate goes up. You get on the treadmill. Let's think about a lady at the YMCA. Okay, she gets on the treadmill at 6:30 a.m. She gets on, she puts it on, 5 miles an hour, no incline, no change to her speed at all, and she starts to run. How long does it take her to get to fat burning? Just any guess. 30 minutes? About that. Anywhere from 18 to 22 minutes, depending on your biomechanics, okay? Let's say the lady doesn't know what we just talked about, okay? She wants to lose fat weight, okay? She wants to burn fat. She gets on the treadmill, and she gets off at 30 minutes. She's sweaty. She definitely looks at the calorie expenditure, and she goes, I burned 352 calories. It's a good day. 30 minutes on the treadmill, I'm feeling pretty good. So if we know that it takes 18 to 22 minutes for her to get to fat burning, how much fat burning time did she have on the treadmill? 10, 12 minutes? So if we know that, just right out of the basics, is her body going to change? No. Is she not getting benefits? Yeah, she's getting tons of benefits. Her cardiovascular system is being taxed. She's flushing out the blood. She's definitely getting benefits. But if she wants to lose fat weight, she's got to go for 18 to 22 minutes. Okay? So this brings us to the energy systems. Okay? So what happens when you start to work out? What happens when we come out of what's called your basal metabolic rate? So this is you in your basal metabolic rate. Just hanging out. This is my basal metabolic rate. This is not my basal metabolic rate. Obviously, the heart rate comes up. The first thing that happens, it's almost like a catalyst or a key that turns on for you to begin to metabolize your fuel, okay? Because really what this is fuel, and we'll talk more about it. But the first thing that happens is called phosphocreatine, okay? So basically, when I describe what happens during a Method 360 class, I use like a fire as an analogy. So what we're trying to do, if we're going to burn fat as our main source of fuel, which is really the best source of fuel you have, and I don't mean to use that word in a negative way. It's a great source of fuel. Most of us just have more of it than we'd like, right? without a match, the fire's not going to go, right? So we need 4 main components to a fire. We need a match. This is phosphocreatine. This is the first energy source that your body goes to, okay? So the phosphocreatine, though, is gone in like 30 seconds. It's gone. And I mean, that's really forgiving. So it's your match. Like just like a match like bursts and then it's gone, that's phosphocreatine. So that's the first thing that happens. It's a catalyst to beginning to crank up your metabolism, right? So the second energy source is anaerobic metabolism, which is right here, okay? So this is the second thing your body draws from. Does anybody know what the second line of energy your body draws from? Before fats. Very good question, very good guess. Yes, carbohydrates, okay? So after your phosphocreatine is gone, the body begins to draw from carbohydrates, right? So we call this anaerobic metabolism. It doesn't require oxygen from the cells in order to make this happen. Here's the thing, okay? So let's talk about the lady on the treadmill for a second. She gets on the treadmill. She comes out of her basal metabolic rate. She lights the match with phosphocreatine. She comes into her anaerobic metabolism, so she starts to draw from carbohydrates. Now, there's a difference in anaerobic right here versus anaerobic versus aerobic metabolism. Aerobic metabolism is your fat metabolism. Anaerobic is your carbohydrates. This is first, right? It feels really different, right? So there's this thing that we talk about in fitness that most people don't go far enough on their first win to realize scientifically they have a second. So when you begin to metabolize carbohydrates right after your phosphocreatine, when you're here, it feels lousy. It feels really yucky. You feel like you can't catch your breath. So if anybody's ever been on a treadmill or if you've gone for a run or if you started something, do you realize how winded you get in the beginning? How like really bad it feels? What happens is it's almost like when you begin to come out of phosphocreatine and go into your anaerobic metabolism, your carbohydrate metabolism, it's like driving a car 30 miles an hour in first gear. So you know what I mean? You ever get that feeling? You ever have a standard car when you put the car into first gear and you rev up to 30 miles an hour and it's just like, meh? That's your anaerobic metabolism. It's carbohydrates. Now the body is an energy, it's very greedy with the energy it gives up. So in order for us to get to aerobic metabolism, which is your fat metabolism, we've got to go through this hazing first. And it's the same for you and you and you and everybody in the room and Michael Phelps. So everybody has to go through this. The hazing period is the same for every person, right? So we know that the hazing period is not going to feel good. In fact, the breathing, they've done scientific research on the breathing of anaerobic metabolism versus aerobic metabolism, which is your fat metabolism. It's less labored in fat metabolism. It feels smoother. It feels better. It's something that's more sustainable. So if you think about this, if we're building a fire, we have the match of phosphocreatine. This is newspaper, okay? It burns very quickly. It's a cheap, easy source of fuel. The body draws from it first because it's easier to break down, right? And if we're going to get geeky about this, in order to release this from your cells, it only has to go through one cell wall. So the body is always going to go to what's easiest to break down first. Does that make sense? All right, so think about the lady on the treadmill for a minute here. Just when she starts to feel good, just when she gets that psychological piece in her head that says, I've done it. Her body has switched gears to fat metabolism. She starts to breathe better. She starts to actually feel good. She turns off the machine, dabs her out, peace. She's done, okay? She feels good. She just got to the fat metabolism, but she stepped off. But here is where the good stuff is, okay? So aerobic metabolism, fat metabolism, is the third source of energy your body goes to. Now remember, it takes 15 to 22, sometimes 18 minutes to get there. The key is, once you're here, you've got to keep your heart rate up. You have to. So let's say that the lady decided that she was going to go for a full hour on the treadmill, right? She understood that this is fat metabolism that we're going to, and she wants to get on the treadmill. But after 30 minutes, she gets off the treadmill. She grabs a drink. She talks to her friends. She has a couple conversations. She gets back on the treadmill 15 minutes later. Do you think she goes right back into fat metabolism? She doesn't. This is a delicate balance. The body doesn't want to give it up. Once we're here, we got to stay here. Okay? So that's the key. So if we're going to talk about the biggest myth of fitness, cardio is king, which is certainly not the case. This is just an example of how to use the energy system. But it's more than just that. aerobic metabolism, the fat metabolism, once we're here, we've got to stay here. We can do it through cardiovascular work, but there's a better way. Okay. Here's the thing. Cardiovascular work is amazing. It's definitely going to increase what we call your VO2 max, and that's your ability to metabolize and use oxygen. It's definitely going to, increase your heart health and your endurance. But here's the thing about Americans. Okay, so Americans typically, one of the things that we've realized, especially when I was going to school in Boston, was that women especially, and some men, certainly not all men, are addicted to cardiovascular work, literally addicted, and we call it the fatigue junkie syndrome. It's very common, specifically in women from the ages of 25 to 50 and beyond, and it still happens. But there's something called the cardio overload principle, and this is based on really cutting-edge research coming out of Boston. And what they're realizing is that once we're aerobic, okay, so once the body begins to metabolize and oxidize fatty acids, when we get to that fat metabolism, if we stay at a constant, frenetic, high heart rate here, the body thinks it's in crisis, right? So if you're here, like, okay, for example, spinning, okay? Has anybody ever taken a spinning class before? It's a stationary bike, right? So you're on a stationary bike and you're spinning. You feel, and I don't know if you guys agree, but when I get off the spinning bike, I feel like I'm going to pass out. It's just so high intensity. It's nonstop high intensity. So they have lit up their phosphocreatine. They've gone through the hazing period of their anaerobic metabolism because they kept their heart rate consistent for after 15 minutes. They get to their aerobic, their fat-burning metabolism. But then when they're here, the heart rate is so high the whole time, and it very rarely drops, right? So we're not spinning like they're push, up and out of your saddle, spin your wheels, which is certainly going to burn calories. It's going to make your heart rate go. Here's the kicker. If you stay up too high, like I was saying, cardio overload principle comes in. The body is extremely primitive in the primitive brain, and what the body thinks is that you're being chased by a bear. So what happens is this right here turns right back to this. And so the body begins to draw from carbohydrates. It doesn't want to give up the source of fuel. Have you ever seen somebody who runs marathons that doesn't look like it? Or does spinning classes that doesn't look like it, right? Normally when that happens, there's one of two things. One thing is they're skipping right over their fat burning because their body thinks it's in crisis, and the body will go back to the crisis fuel, which is the easiest fuel to break down, which is your carbohydrates. Or they've plateaued, and we're going to talk about that as we go. So the key is to do cardiovascular work, but not in the way we've been trained. Cardiovascular work has to look like jagged teeth in order for us to oxidize and maximize fatty metabolism, and also to increase your VO2 max and your endurance. So if we flatline, okay, so if this is our cardio right here, and we flatline and we're at a high heart rate, if we don't have these ebbs and flows, we're literally like a gerbil on a cage. Does that make sense? I know when I went to school, when I first started learning about this, the first thing I thought is, oh my God, I've been doing this wrong for 20 years, and I felt panicked. I really did, and I remember being at school, and I said to my teacher, I'm like, I've been doing this wrong for 20 years. I was an All-American field hockey player. I was a triathlete. I struggled with my weight my whole life, and when I learned this, I said, oh my God, why don't they tell us this? Why is nobody talking about this? I was mad that nobody was saying anything. So basically, the high heart rate that we've been trained to believe is the way to go in the United States is partially true. However, the difference between medicine and poison is dosage. We overdose on high heart rate, the body is going to think it's in crisis. It's actually less beneficial to stay at a high heart rate for an extended period of time than it is to have high heart rate followed by low heart rate, so ebb and flow. So if you remember two things about the cardio thing, remember this. Number one, 30 minutes, not nearly enough. I'm sorry, it's just not, if we want to see significant changes in your body. The second piece of good news is that you don't have to stay here the whole time. It's better if you have this, okay? So if you're on a treadmill, if you're on the elliptical, in order to make cardio work for you, you ever seen that commercial when the little dollar bills begin to work for you? That machine you've got to be the boss of the machine. So when you're on there, you have to play with incline. You have to play with intensities, and you have to have low intensities and recovery in there. It's almost like a reset for the heart. Does that make sense? So if you come down, if we stay frenetic, if we stay up here for too long, the body's like, oh my God. So basically, okay, here's an example, right? You want to work for 3 heart rates. Number one, oh my God, I'm being chased by a bear. You've got to have that a little bit. The other piece is kind of on vacation. I'm kind of running at green lights. I'm okay. The third is heart rate comes down. Do you see how that's resets? And it makes it a lot more attainable. And it makes the body not think you're in crisis. It thinks you're working. So when you're working, this goes away. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions on cardio? Of the 3 energy systems? Okay, phosphocreatine has gone instantaneously, very quickly. So it's like a match. That's gone probably within 30 seconds or so. The carbohydrates, depending on the person, 18 to 22, 25 minutes. Okay? So that's your hazing period. You're going to feel, once you start to really think about this and you really start to practically apply, you're going to feel the difference. In Boston, we were such geeks. We'd go for a run, and we'd be 3.5 miles in or whatever it was. I'm aerobic now. You feel it, and it happens gradually. It doesn't happen like instantaneously. It goes from like 20% fats to 80% carbohydrates, and as you continuously keep the heart rate up, you have to keep the heart rate up, just not here the whole time. It has to be here, right? As long as it's elevated out of your resting heart rate, right? Once we get to the fatty metabolism, the fat metabolism, which takes about 22 minutes, there's your 22 minutes. The other energy source we didn't talk about was proteins. And that's the last source of energy you ever want to draw from, because you pretty much have one foot in the grave and another one on a banana peel. But that's when you see the guys at the Ironman just, completely falling apart. They've exhausted phosphocreatine, they've exhausted carbohydrates, they've exhausted fats, and now they're beginning to pull away from their own tissue, which can also happen with cardio overload principle as well. You can actually begin to metabolize your own proteins, which is not a good thing. So that's your high heart rate. So yeah, the energy systems, I would say, if you can stick to 45 minutes, would be great. 45 minutes of cardio is the bare minimum, with very, very varying heart rates, and varying inclines. So basically, no stagnation. Like once you're on that machine, it is part of your job. Once you're there, every 30 seconds, something's changing. Something's changing. Either you're going lower or you're going higher. If you're at one consistent flat line, you are literally a gerbil on a wheel. And I want you to think about that poor lady at the Y that's been doing this for years, right? It was me. Yep. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's always better to be outside, having those like natural gradients to the track, absolutely. To go a step further, continuously push yourself. So what I do is I'll pick a really high intensity song, and I'll try to keep it high intensity, and then I'll literally put on a slow song and I'll slow everything down. And if you want to go a step further, just buy a watch. Or they have these great apps online where you can program it in. It'll give you a little chirp like every 15 seconds where you can just like dial it up a little bit and then dial it back. But remember, the ebbs and flows are essential. So it's high. Like, for example, a great way to do this would, let's say we're going to go for a 45-minute walk, run, or whatever. 20 seconds, fast as you can. 30 seconds, mid-range. 30 seconds, low. And then again, and again, and again, and again. So the more you can keep your body guessing, the better off you're going to be. You got to outsmart it.
Okay, so I'll be outsmarting this, but can you explain to me physiologically why it's necessary to lower that heart rate?
Yeah.
And make it swing, take it back up, rather than keep it at a fat-burning heart rate, a lower intensity for steady state.
Right. Well, again, once the body becomes accustomed to anything, it's just going to go back to carbs. Because basically what's happening is it's going to use the fats, but what we as human beings we're designed to do is run, stop, work, grab a drink. We're not meant to run 26.2 miles as human beings. I mean, we can do that, but it's not what our bodies are designed to do. Some Kenyans, obviously, and we can do that. We can do it. Doesn't mean we can't. It's not what we're designed to do. We're designed to work hard, stop, work hard, stop. So physiologically, speaking to just having a flat line, even if it's in the fat-burning zone, we're going to get a lot more out of the ebb and flow. And another piece of it that we can speak to is becoming faster. So one of the keys of running, and I don't know if you're a runner, and we can certainly talk and be open about this after we get through the cardio, because I want to ask you guys some questions too. But you ever heard the quote that running doesn't get easier, it just gets faster? You ever heard that? So if we don't have intervals, so basically when we're talking about changing your heart rate, it's an interval. And so if we stayed at 70% in the fat-burning zone, it would burn fat. We might go back and forth to the carbohydrates because the body's like, this doesn't work. This is just every day. You know, the body doesn't think it's doing anything different. Additionally, because of the lower heart rate resetting and then the body having to juice it up for that high intensity, you're going to get faster. So, for example, at Method, we have a lot of competitive triathletes and runners. And we had a woman that's been running marathons. She's actually a running coach her entire life. And because of this interval training and basically understanding the energy systems, this year at Lake Placid, she took 12 minutes off her marathon time from last year. 12 minutes. So intervals don't only really effectively burn fat, but they make you faster and they make you more efficient at using oxygen. Does that make sense? Right. So what about you guys? What do you guys do? What do you do for physical stuff? You're a runner. Good. Okay. And what do you run? Do you race or? Oh, okay. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Me too. Me too. I'm with you. I'm so with you. So, with this kind of stuff, and again, this is something as I would love to know about you guys. And again, just specifically, now that we got to the energy system, so you have this was mind blowing for me. For me, when I learned this, it blew my mind. I was like, what do you mean, like running's not enough? What do you mean that I can't just get on the treadmill and go? What do you mean that 30 minutes is not plenty? Whoa! I was completely blown away. So can we go around the room and maybe just introduce ourselves and just speak a little bit about what you would like to know and what you're doing physically now or how you want to change something, just so I know a little bit about you so I can sort of drive this to get what you need out of it? And you can certainly start them off if you want to start them off.
Well, I think it's really new a lot of stuff that I've studied, and I do read some classes at the Y.
Yeah.
It's been like 10 years ago since I did some real hard, maybe even more than 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Studying some of these energy things, but so I wanted to see what the myths were. I wanted to kind of be up to date.
Sure. Yeah, me too.
With some of this stuff.
It's fascinating.
Yeah. So I'm interested in that. I remember that somebody did some energy stuff, but do it sort of put it into like practice.
Yeah. And the practical application piece is huge. Like, knowing it is one thing. But again, this is something, like, I don't know how you guys feel about this, and we can speak to this, but when I'm working out, let's all agree that it sucks. Can we just agree that it sucks? And when you begin to go through this, at least when I'm in the hell that is anaerobic metabolism, at least I know why. At least I know my car's in first gear, and I know that I'm going to backshift to third. Does that make you feel better to know? It makes... Yeah, at least you know. So it's like you know that there's a reason, there's a method to the madness. So that emotionally it feels better to me. So that's why I like you guys to know it too. So what about you? Your breathing, okay. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Yeah. I get that. That's the worst feeling. That breathlessness is awful, isn't it? Yeah. So any reason, do you talk to your GP about that? Does he give you any specific reasons about? I shouldn't say he, I should mean they. Right. I understand that. I was just talking to my grandparents and my mom about this last night, how awful breathlessness feels. It feels terrible. Terrible. Okay, cool. Sure. Yeah. Oh, great. Awesome. That's fabulous. Amazing. Life changer. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Is it blue? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's great. You can do that. Yeah, it depends on what exercise you're doing. So, no, you won't. You know what? If you're doing anything upper body based, as far as TRX is concerned, you know, you want an angle, because obviously the angle of your body determines the degree of difficulty, but and you're probably primarily doing upper body exercises and maybe stepping out into a lunge, things like that. It's all going to be at the same height, and so I would say if you have an angle, you probably want your feet anywhere from 2 to 3 feet away from the door once you're at the right angle. So it might just take a little bit of playing with it, but make sure the door's locked when you put it over there. Yeah. We've had that happen before. That was fun. That was very funny. That's good. So basically we want to help with breathlessness and increase some strength and stability. I think that's awesome. And let's, as we can all agree, breathlessness, no matter if it's me or you or anybody else, it's awful for all of us. It's not a fun feeling. I don't like it, and I'm a personal trainer. What about you?
I go to a boot camp class. We just introduced Tabata.
Oh, great. Yeah, it's Tabata training. Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, Tabata training mostly is most effective here. Here, not so much. But that's great. It's great to increase your cardiovascular capabilities. Fabulous. Well, we can talk about Tabatas too. That's fascinating science. So what else? What else do you do? Do you do boot camps? Anything else? Run, swim? Yep. Good. Good. Great. That's perfect. Good. So what about you? Excellent. Cool. Right, right. Ooh. Good woman. Yeah, that's amazing.
So I figured I definitely am a very well-versed dietitian, but I took a PhD personal training class in OCC.
Yeah. My brother took that one.
I learned a lot, but certainly didn't go to 6 years of college for personal training like I did to become a dietitian.
Sure.
I'm just really trying to learn a lot more about the fitness side of it. And, you know, most people know so little that I won't apprehensive about that, but most people know so little that what little bit I know seems like a lot.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked out for so long. I'm really into the whole functional thing now.
Sure.
I'm just trying to really get little small group classes and really train people in a different way than it used to be.
Absolutely. I think that's super smart. And I think
From a resistance standpoint and from a cardio standpoint. And it's amazing what people say, like people that are long distance runners, they do something different for 20 minutes. I'm like, why am I so tired? I'm like, because you're doing something different.
yeah.
Change.
It's so true.
So just trying to learn myself right now.
That's great. Well, I certainly have no business giving out any nutrition advice. I'll tell you that right now. Unless wine is a major food group, then I'm all set. So I have utmost respect. We consider ourselves to be fitness experts at Method. We are certainly not nutrition experts. We are fitness. How about you? Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Super fun. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. I know. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Are the exercises that you're doing helping for the knee, the pain? Yeah. Sure. Mm. Yeah. Sure, it's that thought, right? It helps. Just creating the thought. You and me both, lady. Irish. 100% Irish, get it? Oh my gosh, it's a nightmare. Thankfully, I know, it's terrible. Oh my gosh, you are preaching to the choir. I'm glad you're here. How about you?
I guess I'm confused.
Yeah.
And
Makes sense. It's confusing. Yeah. I got one of those too.
Throughout my life, I have weight trained.
Sure.
And I'll say right up front, I'm very quick running.
Yep, I get that too.
Quick, running.
I get it. I get it.
So, but I understand the importance of cardio. That's why I like what I call power walking.
Yep.
And that's why I choose the course that I do, so I have that variance.
Right, right. Sure.
To kind of jumpstart and pick up things and all of that. I'm very selfish with my spare time because I have a million other things
I get that.
I do, so I'm trying to find out the most efficient
Mhm.
and helpful
Yep.
way to go about fitness.
Sure.
And you gotta be something to think about because you do so many different things. I have friends that cut out gluten, not to keep the gluten free because they say the energy or they say the fat, retention.
Mhm.
There's so many different things to read. If you go online, if you listen to radio, you watch TV.
Yeah.
So many different nutrition things that it's very confusing.
It is really confusing.
And all my life I've been lucky that I don't travel as easily.
Good.
But I'm at a point now where things are changing.
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive to my body, so as soon as it changes,
Yeah.
either my energy, the shape of my body, the fat versus muscle,
Yeah.
I want to get going on it again. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to find out the best thing for me time-wise and just to be efficient and do the best I want to be also nutritious and looking good both. I don't want to pick one or the other.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. This is good stuff. So just a quick reminder, this is not about me, this is about you guys. So don't be afraid to ask me a question based on what you need selfishly. Be selfish about this time, okay? So this is your information giving, and I'm just here as a vessel. So if you need to dive into something a little bit deeper, then you just stop me in my tracks and you push me in that direction, because I'm here for you, okay? Efficiency is huge. So here's one little tidbit. 45 minutes nonstop. You're welcome. Yeah. Mhm.
Jillian Michaels here doing a 3-2-1 interval speed, 3 strength, 2 cardio, 1 ab. It takes 22 minutes. Is that enough?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not. No way. Sure. Right. Absolutely, and that's essential as a yoga teacher. It's huge, and we'll talk more about that. But it is, and that's huge. Believe me, it's a huge component. We're literally going to touch on that. But yeah, it's not enough. If you want to see your body change, no, it's not. And Jillian knows that you don't know that. That's why she's banking on the fact that you don't know that. It really makes me mad. All right, moving along. Okay, second. This is a biggie. Calories in versus calories out equals weight loss. Okay? So what we're thinking about here is always efficiency and quality. Okay? Like I said, I am a fitness expert, and I feel confident in calling myself a fitness expert. I am not a nutrition expert, nor do I want to be a nutrition expert. I want to be good at a couple things. This is what I'm good at. So let's talk about the lady. Let's go to Gold's. All right? She's on the treadmill at Gold's. She's running on the treadmill at Gold's. She only runs. That's all she does. She gets up every single morning at 5:30 a.m. She runs 5:30 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. She burns 750 calories. She's not losing weight. She can't figure out why. Okay. Quality of work versus quality of fuel equals aesthetic change. Okay. Part of the reason that she's probably not seeing her body change, and there's 1,000 different things we could talk about right now, but the most basic thing that's happening is probably because she is only running. That's it, okay? I used to live on Nantucket. There was a doctor. His name was Dr. Lepre. He had been running marathons, the Boston Marathon. I think he's run it 26 times. He looks like he's better at doing keg stands. And not anything against Dr. Lepre. He's a wonderful man. But his body doesn't recognize running as work anymore. It doesn't. Your body regenerates all of its cells every 3 months, okay? So if you begin a running program, I'm using running as an example. It could be on the tread. It can be anything as far as anything that you're going to change. Like elliptical is great because it doesn't put a lot of wear and tear on the joints. You start to see all these changes happen in the first month or two. And all of a sudden, getting into the third month, the scale stops moving, you don't feel challenged, but you're still doing the same thing. You're looking at the calories, and your body's not changing. Since your body regenerates all of its cells every 180 days, if you don't change your routine, the body doesn't recognize it as work anymore. And this is where we try to get into the loose term of a plateau. So the quality of your work and the quality of the fuel you're using is where the change in the body comes, okay? So running, another thing that it doesn't do, it doesn't really change your structure, right? So you're going to definitely increase your bone density when you're running. As far as like aesthetic changes, you're not going to get good biceps from running. You're not, right? The calories are going to go down. You're probably going to lose weight initially, but if you don't do anything different and you don't really maximize the quality of the fuel, again, remember, if that lady is running for 60 minutes and her heart rate's too high or she doesn't change her heart rate, she's just burning off carbs. It should make you mad. It's like, oh, God, I can't look. It just makes me so sad. All right, so I wear a hat to the gym because I can't look anymore. So there's where the danger lies. So again, it's not just calories in and calories out. And obviously, I'm not a dietitian, but I'm sure you can speak to that. The quality of the fuel you put in has a lot to do with the quality of work you're going to do on the treadmill. So it's sort of a cyclical or symbiotic relationship, right? We work with two dietitians at Method 360. We work with Georgia Austin, who's very medical. She does a lot of blood work. We also work with Kelly Springer, who does a lot of real food for real people. So again, if we can't give you answers, we want to push it to the experts that can. So that's that. EPOC. This is huge right here. Okay. So basically, EPOC, it's a fancy word for afterburn, right? Has anybody heard of afterburn before? Okay. So if somebody gets on the treadmill and that's all they do is run, or all they do is get on the elliptical, or all they do is get on a spinning bike, and their body doesn't respond to it as exercise anymore because it's been 3 months, the other piece that they're not getting, the quality of the work that they're producing, is they're not creating any muscle fiber tear. Okay, so muscle fiber tear occurs with primarily what we call an eccentric movement. So in fact, this movement doesn't do anything to build muscle. It reconnects the muscle fibers. It's actually this movement. So if we don't have the separation of the muscle fibers, we have nothing to repair. Two things happen when you work out. First of all, you use these energy systems, you go through your metabolism, blah, blah, blah. It's great. The second thing that happens is when you add weight training, your muscle fibers, basically you're doing damage, if you want to think of it, good damage, like almost like the kind of damage that needs to be repaired. So when you work out, once you get to aerobic metabolism, all right, the metabolism that requires you to oxidize fats, it takes oxygen to make that fat metabolism happen. It has to go through 2 cell walls, right? So oxygen is depleted from the cells. That needs to be replaced. It takes energy to replace that, right? So when you go home or when you're leaving the gym or when you're at home, when you really maximize fat metabolism, all the oxygen that you use to oxidize fats needs to be replaced. It takes energy to do that. That's going to require energy, which is your afterburn, a.k.a. EPOC. The other repair process is the muscle fiber tear. To regrow, it's called hypertrophy. So muscle fibers are about the size of a human hair, right? So in Method 360, we do a lot of body fat analysis, we do a lot of body analysis, and we really focus on lean mass. What happens is, as you tear the muscle fiber, that muscle fiber needs to be repaired. It takes energy to do that. So the beauty of your workout or your quality of work here doesn't actually happen when you're in the gym or you're on the treadmill or you're on your trail run. It happens when you go to sleep, when things begin to repair. So when you leave the gym and you're walking away from it, the cells are already beginning to reoxygenate themselves. And when you go to bed at night, the muscles are beginning to repair. So it doesn't just happen with the energy on the treadmill. Like if you come to a Method 360 class, if people wear like a body bug or something, they'll burn anywhere from, depending on their body type, 650 to 800 calories during a class. But that's just in the house. It's not out, meaning when they go home and they reoxygenate and they repair their muscle fibers, they burn an extra 500 to 600 calories. So it's not just about what happens in the building, it's what happens when you leave. Does that make sense? Right? Okay. All right. So it's more than calories in, calories out. Big. Scale, big, fat liar. Don't get on it. It'll make you cry. All right. So the scale tells us the truth. No, it doesn't. It's like marrying somebody that they're behind a big sheet, and you never get to know their personality or see their face, and you base your marriage on that. So Again, this is probably more women than men, but it does not tell the truth. In fact, it lies by omission. And especially if you're training athletically or you're trying to get stronger or you're trying to change your structure, the scale is probably one of the worst ways to measure your success. Anybody ever heard of BMI? Another bad way to determine your health. Okay, this has nothing to do with lean mass. So they take basically your height and your hip to waist ratio and they determine whether you're fit. This doesn't take into concern any muscle. It doesn't take into concern any bone structure or any genetics at all. So basically, this is becoming extremely outdated to the fact that we didn't even talk about this when I was in school at all. They literally just wrote it off as useless and said, if you ever see it, ignore it. You're obese. You're obese. No. Yeah. Yes, you do. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Sure. Mm-hmm. According to BMI, I'm obese. Yeah. Yep, because I have a lot of muscle. I'm obese according to BMI. Oh, yeah. Yes. It's like, okay, so fat to muscle, if we're going to get very generalized about this, and this one's going to completely overgeneralize, it's like comparing steel to marshmallows, right? Marshmallows take up a lot of space, and they're light. Steel doesn't take up very much space, but it's heavy. So the more steel you have on, obviously the heavier you're going to be, right? So the BMI. So basically, if I had a big black marker, I would put skull and crossbones over it. It's useless, absolutely useless. Body composition is great, and I'm sure you can attest to this. Body composition is where it's at, okay? So basically, we know the scale is baloney. We know BMI is baloney. Body composition, what really does that mean? Lean body mass, okay? So when I assess a person, when they come into method and they say, want a body assessment, I say, okay. We talk about things and, we start to talk about the structure of their body. I weigh them. I pinch them with calipers. And I do their hip to waist ratio. And this is really a good determining factor of whether your diet's on point is to get the hip to waist ratio, really, especially for women in the belly. Lean body mass is the parts of you, in my assessments, I do the old-fashioned calipers right here. It's called the Pollock scale. It's the parts of you that exist below the layer of fat that's underneath your skin, okay? Bones, muscles, water, organs, extracellular, intracellular fluids, things like that. So basically, we call this subcutaneous layer of fat, your layer of fat that exists above the muscle. That's what I measure, okay? So everything else besides this layer of fat is your lean body mass. So let's talk, and I don't mean to use running as a bad example. It's certainly a wonderful thing. However, it's just we have a lot of runners in Syracuse. There's a huge running community here. So when a runner comes into me and I do their lean body mass and their weight is 155 pounds and I assess them, their lean body mass is 91, that means that 60% or 60 pounds of them is body fat. So what we call them, and again, and this is certainly not a judgment, it's a skinny fat person, meaning they're very thin and skinny. However, they have this subcutaneous layer of fat that exists above these very, very fragile bones because they're not adding any strain to the body except for this, and they're not changing their plane of motion, which we're going to get into soon. So their lean body mass, especially with their bone structure, since they're not creating hypertrophy by lifting weights or doing TRX or doing anything else, is very low. So we see that happen. So the scales tells one story. Like, for example, my head trainer, Kristen, she weighed the same as a runner that I assessed. The runner's lean mass, they weighed the same, 132. The runner's lean mass was under 90 pounds, and hers was 120. They weighed exactly the same, but they looked totally different. Does that make sense? Like, it's very hard to kind of describe unless you can really have the visual, but so much more to the story than the scale, and the scale is such a very basic, sort of archaic way of looking at real, true body composition. So lean body mass. The other piece of this is fat weight, and this is again, the subcutaneous layer. When we do an assessment in Method 360, I do 7 sites. And what I do is I pinch them, and I separate the layer that exists between their muscle and their skin. And this layer right here is literally the fuel of Method 360. This fuels our classes. So that's literally the energy source that we draw from in very, very basic terms to make this work happen. So when I do a body assessment at Method, it spits out lean body mass. It spits out a literally poundage number of their fat weight, right? So we can determine what their level of fitness is or what their body structure is by their lean body mass, whether it's low or high, and what the fat weight is above it, okay? So it just gives us a really good idea of what the structure of their body is. And then it spits out this percentage of body fat, which is extremely beneficial to understand and see that thing change, as we don't base it on a number on a big black box. These three things right here are really what matter. And that's what's really going to determine where your body is changing, not the scale. So we do assessments at Method with a large number of our clients. And once we put that together with a photo study and a postural analysis, and we really start to see these people change, they start to look like athletes because their body composition changes. A lot of times, this doesn't change that much, but they look totally different, right? So any questions on that? Cool. Yeah. I know. Because they don't want to get big. They do. Hi. But do you ever hear that thing? It's terrible. It's so true. I know. It's such an attachment that we have. But really what it comes down to is us educating them on how this works. And sometimes it takes me an hour to educate them and to talk them and deprogram. Right? And one of my favorite things is like lifting doesn't make you huge, cupcakes make you huge. Those kinds of things where it's like that's not what the problem is. It's not the lifting. And again, unless you have massive amounts of testosterone running through your veins, it's statistically impossible for that to happen. The scale is going to change. For some of my clients, especially runners, sometimes it goes up because they trade marshmallow for steel. And so the scale doesn't move, and literally the visceral response is, and I'm like, it's okay. Let's talk about it. Let's think about it. Let's work through it together. So this brings us to the next piece, which is the lifting piece. And again, this we can go two directions with men and women here. One of the biggest fitness trends out there is CrossFit. Has anybody heard of that? Okay. Yeah. Okay. We're not going to speak to it too much, but we're going to get more into it. But there's a lot of trends in fitness. Okay, so let's throw a couple of them out. What have you guys heard? We got CrossFit. We got Jillian. We got T25. What else? Zumba. Yep. Okay, we got Zumba. TRX. Yep. Fitness trends. These are trends in fitness. So there's some of them that are like methods. There are some are equipment. Some are videos. So basically, let's kind of like look at these and structurally compartmentalize them. What do I like about Jillian Michaels? She adds strength training, right? She definitely adds strength training. Do I love it? Do I love that she, makes you work out for 20 minutes? No, I don't love that at all. What do I love about CrossFit? I love CrossFit that gets people in a community and gets them working hard. Do I love the fact that they add tons of reps in a timed with tons of weight? No, I don't love that. I think it's terrible. I think that anybody that's ever been educated in fitness should be horrified that people are working out in that way. And I am opinionated, and I will be 100% open with the fact that I'm very opinionated. So TRX, that's a great example of a fitness trend. In my opinion, with TRX, I like TRX, which we'll get into more as we go on, is that it works triplanar movements. Triplanar. For example, a TRX is great because we can work push and pull in the same exercise. It's all body weight, so you're still going to get that eccentric movement. So resistance training is not just resistance training is okay. So when I bend my knee, concentric. When I release, eccentric. That's creating muscle fiber tear right there. It's part of my workout, right? So resistance training doesn't have to have weights. It just has to have a movement that's going to be beneficial. Okay. So we know TRX is a fitness trend that works body weight, and it works. It has a lot of degrees of. It can work to a lot of different fitness levels, which I love. CrossFit works out mainly on one plane of motion, one. So for example, okay, a TRX move. This is a really standard TRX move. It's called a skater, okay? So you hold onto the handles. It's a cardiovascular move. You see the rotation in my hips, right? And then they have a row, which is another plane of motion, and then we can face away from the anchor point and get a wide grip push-up. So in 3 exercises on the TRX, we have cardiovascular work, we have variety of heart rates, which we know maximizes fat metabolism. We have push, we have pull, and we have all 3 planes of motion. CrossFit, box jumps. One. So again, when we open up these triplanal movements, better level of fitness, less injury. Have anybody ever heard of anybody getting hurt at CrossFit? Yeah. So basically, the lifting is important, and it goes a little bit further. So there's obviously a little bit more to the story, okay? So obviously we know that lifting is not going to make you huge, okay? Strength is important, but couple that with conditioning, right? So it's great to lift. Like, for example, my boyfriend is the assistant field hockey coach at SU. He loves to lift, like, you know, tries and buys, all the old-fashioned lifting, the squats and all those things are great. But if I get him on the track to run, it's like a little withering plant, just falls apart. So it's basically, it seems to be able to fit into one box. CrossFit is the one example where it seems to be a little bit more variety, and I think Jillian does too. Strength and conditioning work in concert, right? So if you're really cardiovascularly fit, like for example, people come to Method and they can run 26.2 miles, but I get them into plank position for a minute and they can't hold it. And I'll get guys from CrossFit that come to Method 360 that can bench press a car, but they can't do jumping jacks for more than 30 seconds. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Sure. Yeah, exactly. So strength and conditioning. I don't know if anybody's ever played college sports, but that was one of the scariest things is to watch the strength and conditioning coach come up to the field because you knew that it was going to be hard strength-wise and it was going to be hard cardiovascularly. So those are just 2 main components of fitness. So if we stay on one side of the fence for too long, like if we're a marathon runner and that's the box that we fit into, but we don't know plank, are we truly fit? Right? If we can do box jumps at CrossFit and bench press a car, but we can't jog for 10 minutes, are we truly fit? Superhero. Yeah. Superhero. So like when Batman's plane goes down, he like shoots out a gun and he can like rappel off the side of the gear. In fitness, you've got to have so many hats. Do you know what I mean? Like that's going to make you successful in fitness is having these hats. And just simplifying the hats. So basically, if we stay in one box for too long, if you lift, therefore you are, and you can't run a mile, or you can't get on the elliptical, or you can't do a little speed walking up a hill in the Adirondacks, you're in trouble, right? Triplanal movements. Highlighter. Anybody ever heard of a squat? Lunge? Running? Cycling? One plane of motion, right? So when people come to Method 360, specifically runners, do you think it's beneficial for me to keep them here? Right? So what do you think would work better for them to keep them injury-free? Right? So if we work laterally for a runner, right, it's probably going to be more beneficial to them because they probably want to run for a long time. It's just like anything else. If we don't work push and pull, if we don't work rotation, we don't work lateral movements, and we only work on the front to back plane of motion, statistics say we're probably going to get hurt, which makes sense, right? Okay. Huge, and we'll get more into this. But so basically, there's 3 planes of motion. One is called sagittal, right here. One is called frontal, here. And the other is transverse. And this is what yogis are all about, and we'll get to the yoga piece. So that is another way to create your superhero-ishness. So a really good way to avoid that 3-month plateau that we talked about, the 3 months that your body regenerates all itself, change your plane of motion, right? So if you run all the time, and that's great, maybe get in the pool and swim, or, maybe get together with your friends, run up sideways down the hill. If your body can't figure it out, you've got to be ahead of it. Then you're not going to plateau. So basically, if the body doesn't know the exercise or the amount of time you're going to be doing it for, it can't plateau. It's statistically impossible for that to happen. So the variety is the key, right? Triplanar movements will also keep you injury-free. Plateau, we talked about, right? The lifting incorporated with your strength or your conditioning, meaning your cardiovascular work, is going to help avoid this plateau, right? So if I am a runner and I plateaued at 3 months, what's a really easy fix for that? What would they do? Add a little strength training? Maybe some plank? Maybe run up the hill sideways? Maybe do a couple push-ups? Those kinds of things. Tiny changes make the biggest difference. It's not earth-shattering. It's very easy. Yoga practice might help. Another way to keep them injury-free. So not only do these triplanar movements avoid plateau, the dreaded plateau, but they also keep you injury-free, which is one of the main components of yoga. Yoga is based on the 6 degrees of freedom in the spine. So, for example, this is a much more involved version, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's what yoga is based on. All those movements. So if we're caught here at CrossFit, we're probably going to plateau and we're probably going to get hurt. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. Brings us back to functional fitness. Fitness is meant to be there to make you better at other things. Okay? The aesthetics are a byproduct of the style of training you're working on. Most people, and I say most because it's not all, they come because they want to look different. At Method, the style that we developed, we don't focus on that necessarily. It's not our main focus. What we're trying to do is make people better at other things. We have a lot of runners and triathletes or people that are just trying to understand fitness and be educated about fitness. The aesthetic piece is a byproduct of the style of training, right? And we'll talk more about this as we go, but functional fitness, right, for a runner, if we're going to move sideways or if we're going to incorporate a yoga practice, what we're trying to do is make runners faster and less prone to injury. And aesthetically, they change as a byproduct of that stuff. Make sense? Coming back to EPOC. Remember, afterburn happens after your workout. So remember, the beauty of your workout doesn't actually happen inside the building with your lifting. This is where your hypertrophy comes from, right? So tear, night-night, repair, takes energy. EPOC, so you burn after your workout. It's a big, I'm lost right now. I wrote it down, and this is terrible that I can't remember this. I'm dyslexic, and this is one of the things I struggle with. I can't remember the verbiage of EPOC. Yes, but I can find that for you. Post-exercise. That's why it jams me. It's like, dyslexia every time. It's like post-exercise oxygen consumption, something like that, right? We'll say that. 30 is plenty. We know this is not the case. Okay? So let's talk about this for a minute. Why is 30 not plenty? Why? Correct. Fat metabolism occurs between what? Where's fat metabolism occur? What time? What time are you burning fat? Okay, so if you... Infomercials. Oh, Jillian. Oh, hi, Jillian. Okay, let's talk about Jillian for a minute. How about T25? Sean P. T25. So if we know that fat metabolism occurs after 25 minutes, and people like Jillian Michaels and Sean T say to us, you want to have the best fat-burning workout of your life, 25 minutes is all it's going to take. Really? I mean, obviously you're going to get some EPOC and afterburn, but really? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So basically what they're doing right here is they know that you don't know this, and they're selling you products because you don't know. So we know if you want to, is this not going to be beneficial if you work out for 30 minutes? It's going to be great. You're certainly going to get benefits, but if you want to burn fat and see your body change, the infomercials that are selling you T25, okay, so let's say T25. How much fat burning are you going to get with T25? Yeah. Thanks, Sean T. Save it. This is a big one. Personal trainer knows everything. And this is one thing that, again, is a touchy subject, but I want to bring it up only because I think it's really important, because you want to know your personal trainer, right? So one of the things that's a problem that we see in fitness is this kind of information exchange, right? There's not a lot of information about fitness. There's not a lot of people that are willing to give the information. In fact, I'll be completely open with you. When I was in Boston, and I was frenetic about learning about this stuff, and I realized how much I didn't know and how wrong I had been doing it for 20 years, the first thing they told me is don't tell people how it works. Don't tell them. And I couldn't. I just didn't feel right about that. But the problem is not only, there is certainly great, I mean, we are right next to one of the best universities in the country, with one of the best fitness and exercise programs in the country. Corey Parker, anybody ever heard of him? He's wonderful. He's a strength and conditioning coach at SU. He's an amazing source of information. We actually took over our space from him. He works very closely with all the teams, and a very well-educated man. Unfortunately, Corey is very, very, very rare. People like that. Most of the personal trainers working in the United States have an online certification, okay? So basically, when I went to school in Boston, Harry Hansen is the owner of AAPT, American Academy of Personal Training. We know that basically 85% of the personal trainers working in the United States went online to get certified. They never had to touch a body. They never had any practical application. They never were corrected. They never received any feedback. And it's a problem because there's this lack and gap of information. There's the online certification, and then there's Corey Parker, right? So basically, the owner of my school, the guy that created my school, he created American Academy of Personal Training because his son was 9 years old, wanted to be like his dad, found a very easy online certification, did it, and received a certificate in the mail that he was a personal trainer just like his dad. So this is happening all over the place. It happens at every gym, in every state, in every county in the United States. And it should scare you. And it's not to say that these people aren't well-meaning people, but they don't have practical application, meaning they didn't understand that somebody had to be in a squat position with the hips tilted back, shoulders back and down, straight up, those kinds of things. And it seems very basic, but would you want a doctor operating on your brain that never touched a body? Probably not. So again, even the trainers, as well-meaning as they are, they don't have a lot of resources. And the one online, or the one certification that's at OCC is probably one of the best ones I've seen.
And that's pretty scary because, I mean, I love the class, so it's understanding, but like I said, I certainly don't feel like I'm an expert personal trainer. I'm a person who loves to exercise, and I know a lot about wellness.
Yeah.
But it's scary because there's people there that barely got out of high school, and they got a 71 on that test.
I know it.
They're done.
It's so scary.
In fact, there was one kid in my class that got a 55 and called me up and said, "You obviously were the smartest person in the class, so if I pay you, will you tutor me so I can pass?"
Yes.
And I tutored him and he did pass, but
right.
I can read a book and memorize stuff.
Sure. So I mean,
You're right about that.
it's scary. It is scary. And so, I mean, you know, a spinning instructor doesn't have to be a personal trainer. A CrossFit instructor doesn't have to be a personal trainer. TRX instructor doesn't have to be a personal trainer. A personal trainer might have a TRX instruction certificate and a spinning certificate, but they got certified online. So even though they have these certificates that say that they have these things behind them, it doesn't necessarily mean that they this is a big, like, sort of opening Pandora's box, but I think it's really important. I think it's one of the biggest myths in fitness is that you're in the hands of somebody that's well-educated. They're well-meaning and they may love fitness, but they might not necessarily have all the skills in order to train you properly.
And in fact, there's also no law that you can open a gym up and not even have a personal trainer certificate.
I know. It's very amorphous.
Absolutely.
So we believe this is a problem we're trying to solve. So Method 360 has a very rigorous training program. It's much like yoga teachers, I think, have it right, where they have to go through 200 hours. They have to have the practical application. So Method is creating a certification where the trainers have to go through 200 hours. So our trainers have to go through 3 months of internship, practical application. My trainers come from Boston, educate them before they can even work on the floor. So that's how important we believe this education to be. So again, coming back to not properly educated, I don't mean this to say that these people are not well-intended and they're not passionate. I don't mean that. They just don't have the right resources, and we're trying to change that. So again, we see it as a problem that is very fixable. However, we have to talk about it in order for it to be fixed. So again, 85% of trainers in the U.S. are educated online. Any questions about that? Something is better than nothing. Okay. Dollar store, I'm so terrible with analogies. Love the dollar store, I do, because I have 2 kids and I like to clean my house and all that stuff. However, if I'm going to buy mayonnaise, I think I'd rather buy it from Danny Dubs than over the dollar store, right? So what we're trying to do is, yes, something is better than nothing. 25 minutes with Jillian Michaels is better than sitting on your butt. Are you going to burn fat? We know that that's probably not going to happen. Are you going to see some structural changes? Yes. Are you going to see some health benefits? Yes. And we could probably go one step better. So quality, right? So if we know that the quality of Wegmans is different than the dollar store, just because we might save 50 cents, we'd probably rather go to Wegmans, right? So I'd rather get my mayo from Wegmans rather than the dollar store. So basically what you want to strive for is efficiency and quality, just what you were talking about. So if you're going to commit an hour or 45 minutes of your time, and we know that we have to keep the heart rate consistent in order to burn fat, and we know we have to have high and low heart rates, and we know we have to have triplanal movements, we should probably have a plan, right? So when you come up and have your plan, that we know that the quality of the work that you're putting in absolutely matters. Okay, so is the quality of the work that somebody's putting in on the treadmill for 35 minutes necessarily the best thing they can do for themselves? Probably not. The quality could probably be enhanced by getting off the treadmill after 25 minutes, one aerobic, and then working into a very efficient triplanar resistance circuit. Or vice versa, you can start with resistance too. In fact, that's probably a better thing to do.
Do you think that's what I would tell people, because you don't want to be exhausted when you're
Yeah. That's a really good point, is to start with resistance training. Because, here's a great point too, is that it doesn't matter if you run frenetically for 25 minutes or if you lift consistently for 25 minutes, you're going to become aerobic at the same time. So if I can sprint and sprint and sprint for 25 minutes, I'm at my fat metabolism. Or I can do my lunges, my squats, push-ups, a little bit of yoga, and I'm going to get aerobic at the same time anyway. As long as my heart rate is elevated, the cell walls have to be crossed in order for that aerobic metabolism to be achieved. So it doesn't have to be running. In fact, it's much more beneficial to start with resistance training. I think it's really beneficial in order to know how to use them. We train people how to take their own, so we'll have them stop every once in a while. But more normally, if you're going to get very, very basic about it, think about colors. Super high, red. You want red. You want yellow, which is somewhere in the middle, and you want green. So we know that the difference in the heart rate is different here to here to here. Right? So think of your 3 different colors. So there's 3 different pieces right there. You could take that one step better by doing 3 planes of motion as well. Right. Yeah. And we can certainly use a heart rate monitor. It'll be beneficial. However, it's good to understand I don't go by reps. I don't go by time. I go by the way it feels. And I train my clients to just go by the way it feels. But you do. Oh, my God. I know. It's crazy, isn't it? And that we'll get to that point. So, again, triplanal fat metabolism. If you're going to do something, you're going for your quality. Remember the variety of heart rates for fat metabolism. And remember your 3 planes of motion. Absolutely essential to get really good results. So basically, no longer accepting something is better than nothing as an option. So basically, we're always going to Wegmans. Always going to Wegmans. We're just going to cross off the dollar store. We're just always going to go to Wegs. Or Trader Joe's. Okay, one of my favorites. I can't do yoga. I'm not flexible. What? What's that? I'm not flexible, and I teach yoga. So basically with strength training, to see a change in your body, it takes anywhere, to become stronger, it takes anywhere for you to notice strength changing. It's going to take anywhere from, sometimes 2, maybe 4 weeks. So that's all it takes. The same thing is true of stretching. You're going to notice a very remarkable change in your flexibility if you give it attention. So just because you're not flexible doesn't mean that yoga is not going to be beneficial. In fact, I think that one of the best things I learned out of my yoga teacher training, we had a PT that came in and worked with us for 4 days, which was a blessing. And he said he loves runners because they keep him in business. And the reason why is because they don't, not only do they only work one plane of motion, but additionally they usually don't stretch. So a yoga practice is just, it's PT. It's just ebb and flow. It's just a different way of getting something for your body. So this is where we're coming to, ebb and flow. Like, not all intensity can be gauged in speed. So as Americans, we're so trained to think bigger, better, faster, stronger, where sometimes, like you're saying, like the end of the day, slowing it down and getting that reset button, or coming into your breathing, or stretching your IT band, or opening up your psoas muscle, or getting a back bend, like as we age, we become kyphotic, right? This is called kyphosis. Huge part of the yoga practice is a heart opener. And good form always comes from here. We train our clients this, almost ad nauseum. So in yoga, this is called Tadasana. And when I was in Boston, we called this anatomical position. They're exactly the same thing, right? So basically, understanding that to take a day off of running or take a day off of lifting and doing yoga, you're still getting towards the benefits. Are you still going to burn fat? A little. Are you going to get the benefit of that psychological reset and opening up the muscles and facilitating your fascia? Yeah. So basically, I say to people all the time, I'm a huge runner too, and I love to run. One of the best ways to describe it is when I run, I tell my body I love it, or it's my time I take for myself, like having that time efficiently. But when I do yoga, I listen to my body tell me it loves me back. So it gives your body a voice. It allows you to come into this creakiness and the shoulders. And I say to my clients all the time, there's no such thing as a bad shoulders. There's no such thing as a bad hip. There's no such thing as a bad knee. It just is. And yoga allows you to sort of accept the body that you're driving and that it's going to be different every day. This is huge for decreasing your risk of injury. Like I said before, my boyfriend is a field hockey coach, and he's Scottish, and he's very much from Scotland, Scottish, and he's very into the athletes for the World Cup. There's a professional player that's 40 years old, which is unheard of in professional soccer, and they really believe his playing ability has been so standard or so consistent is because he has a very active yoga practice. So basically, it increases your stability, decreases your risk of injury, increases your mind-to-body connection. So often we get into our body and we just say, drive, where yoga allows your body to say, actually, I'm tired, and that's okay. This keeps you coming back to play another night, just like that 40-year-old soccer player. So basically, that PT that I met at yoga teacher training, yoga, he loves runners because they keep him in business. This will keep you out of the PT's office. Running is the best exercise. Probably one of the biggest myths in fitness. It's great. However, we know it's only on one plane of motion, right? A lot of wear and tear in the joints. Another thing that's true of running is that a lot of runners don't have a lot of core strength. And unfortunately, that's the power center of your body. It takes a lot of shock absorption out. It's very easy to build core strength. So imagine a runner. How many times their Achilles tendon has to contract to do this? And if they are all wet noodle in here and there's no shock absorption. So listen to the difference. Not core engaged. Core engaged. See the difference? Pound, 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 pound. And all of a sudden I'll have a runner come in and they have a hip issue. So one plane of motion, we know that that's going to increase risk of injury. It's going to probably look at plateau. A lot of wear and tear on the joints. There's our risk of injury. This is a biggie. You're talking about protein as an energy source. Cardio overload principle also plays into fact with bone density. Once we stay too much in one exercise, the bone density becomes compromised, and the body will actually go to protein or your muscles as a source of fuel. So it's a great exercise as far as cardiovascular fitness is concerned. However, basically, we're looking at a huge increased risk of plateau and a big difference in the structure of the body. In fact, this decrease in density is why a lot of runners come into Method 360 and they get assessed and their lean body mass is like in the low 90s. And as a trainer, you're just like, ooh, okay, we need to make sure that changes. So this is coming back to that overload theory, the cardio overload principle. Too much of one thing is a big difference. So basically, we'll come back to this, but the difference between medicine and poison is dosage. So if we overdose on one thing, if we're not a superhero, meaning like in fitness, obviously, then we're probably going to get injured. Showing up is enough. It's really unfortunate because one thing that we have our clients do is become very mindful when they walk in the door. You know, anything that you're doing outside of the class, there's no talking in our classes. It's very much focused on what you're doing, how the body feels, what body you're driving, those kinds of things. We make sure they become very mindful so that basically the chatter that happens in the brain doesn't exist. And we know that this is a huge component of fitness. So in Method, we believe very wholly in 5 principles of fitness. And this is one of the main questions on our teacher training, the 200-hour teacher training that we have. These are big ones, so I want you to write these down. Cardiovascular work, essential. However, if we overdose on cardio, since we've talked about this today, what happens? Plateau, injury, lack of fat metabolism. Your body thinks it's being chased by a bear. One plane of motion. Okay. Another huge piece, strength training. Okay. So if without cardio, we know that we're not 100% fit. If we're not strong, if we don't have, you know, the core strength to take the wear and tear out of our joints for running, this is going to compromise our fitness as a whole, right? However, think about the overdose. If we lean more towards one area, if we're leaning more towards strength training and not towards cardio, you know, are we truly fit? Probably not. Flexibility. Yoga. So if you can run 26.2 miles, you can bench press a car, you can't touch your toes. If you get into pigeon pose, somebody's ever seen that one, or if you can't get into cross-legged position on your bum, are you truly fit? If you can't get up off the floor, are you truly fit? Probably not. So flexibility is a huge component to fitness. Stability. You can run 26.2 miles. You can bench press a car. You can do the craziest yoga posture known to man. But you can't do this. Are you truly fit? Probably not. Right? All these are great, but they're all structural and biomechanic. The most important piece, psychology, the way to talk to yourself. This is probably the main focus of our training at Method 360, is deprogramming bad thinking. One thing I've noticed as a fitness professional is different personalities. And as you guys know, I'm sure you probably know my personality well. I'm very extroverted and I'm very opinionated. I'm also a big geek. But one of the things I've noticed about people that I work with is that I used to, when I was doing this on Nantucket, I used to draw a picture of the body language of the person that I would assess. Right? So somebody walks in the building. First person, and I will animate myself. First person's like, I'm ready. What do you got to learn? I want to learn stuff. What are we going to do? What do you got for me? Oh, I don't really care how much weight I lose. I just want to feel better. I'm excited. Let's do this. Yes! Okay, that's client number 1. Here's client number 2. I hate working out. What do you do for fitness? I get on the treadmill. Sometimes I do. I've done like 3 marathons. Really? Okay. I don't eat well. And my hip hurts. Okay. So these 2 clients, very different clients. They weigh the same. They're the same age. They live in the same town. And this happened. This is a tiny island I lived on. And these are real people I'm talking about. Who do you think lost more weight? Who do you think lost more weight? There is something about the way that you treat yourself and the results that come on that scale. I have no way to quantify it. I have absolutely no evidence to back it up. I'm telling you right now, the way that you talk to yourself has 85% to do with your success in fitness. Yeah, sure. Right? So you have a bad day. Your hip hurts. Big deal. Do it anyway. If that hurts you, do something else. So what we think our job at Method, or at least my job as a personal trainer, is when the monkey brain begins to happen and the excuse-making system, as I like to call it, begins to start to flow. The fact that we have great trainers at Method 360 and we believe in education and we believe in a 200-hour certification and we know all the 5 principles of fitness and we know overload theories is great. If I can't get my client out of their own head, they have literally wasted their time. So, before any of this happens, garbaggio until this is in the right spot. We believe in this so wholeheartedly at Method that part of our teacher training, we have them with a sports psychologist, that all of our trainers have to go through part of the training with a psychologist in order for them to understand how to speak to and motivate a client that's here. How do we get them here? And we realize the way that we get them here is to educate them properly. So when they're educated, they can't go to that place where the brain starts to say, I can't, I won't, I don't know how, this hurts. Okay, what are you going to do? Running doesn't work for me. Doesn't work for me a lot of times either. Can you get on a bike? Yeah, well then the problem solved. What next? Oh, my hip hurts. So, how about your arms? Are they broken? No? Okay. And so we start to speak to these parts of psychology, and really, guys, this is the biggest thing. So if you can speak to yourself without judgment and literally get into the body that you're driving and be okay with the fact that it's perfect the way it is, that we're just going to try these 4 things that are before it out and see how they fit you, everything's going to be good. And it is statistically impossible. Once we kind of touch on this, pepper this, and this in together, it is statistically impossible for you not to change. Literally, statistically impossible. So what we've realized too in fitness is that 75% of fitness endeavors fail. Retention rate in most gyms is around 30%. At Method, we're 91%. And we think that it's because we have a community of people that speak to themselves and each other kindly, support each other, no judgment, and they're wicked smart, as we say in Boston. They're wicked smart. So we believe that our clients know as much as any trainer working at Gold's. In fact, probably more. Yeah. So that's that, guys.